November 2023. Welcome to the County Planning Committee. I'm Councillor George Richardson, Chair of the Committee, and I'm chairing today's meeting. I've asked you to switch off your microphones. We have a number of officers with us this morning who I'll now ask to introduce themselves, starting with Amanda on my right.
Amanda Stevenson, Committee Services.
Neil Carter, I'm the Solicitor to the Committee.
Stephen Reid, I'm a Planning Manager, Chair.
George Burgeon, Senior Planning Officer.
Steve Puttington, Principal Planning Officer. Phil Harrison, Highway Development Manager.
Thank you, everyone. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies for Councillor David Boyes and Councillor Mike Curra.
And do we have any substitute members?
No, Chair, no subs.
Any declarations of interest from any member? Can we move on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of October then, please? Can we agree those minutes? Thank you. We'll now move on to the applications to be determined. It's the site of the former Black and Decker Green Lane, Spennymoor. We have 4 registered speakers for this item. I'll now ask George Spurgeon, Senior Planning Officer, to present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this application relates to an undeveloped parcel of land that forms part of the wider Durham Gate site in Spennymoor. Durham Gate was originally approved for a mixed-use development in 2009, comprising a range of developments such as residential, offices, retail and other uses. At that time, all the affordable housing provision for the residential and the Section 106 monies were waived on the basis that the residential development was intended to fund the first phases of the business park, which were intended to come forward on the application site today. Well, what we're here to consider today is an application, it's a hybrid application which seeks outline plan and permission for up to 96 dwellings on land which is allocated in the County Durham Plan for employment land and was identified within the original master plan for the Durham Gate site as for office use, as well as seeking full planning permission for detailed consent for a parcel of open space in terms of the landscaping and equipped play space relating to the previous residential development to the west of the site. So, the application site. So, the housing is would be proposed to be located to this site here. You can see we're bordered by the A167 to the east. To the south, we have an existing living housing office with Thinford Roundabout and the development over here, which has recently taken place. To the north, we have industrial uses, and beyond this, off-screen, we have land which has been rebranded as Durham Gate North, which has a range of recent office units that have been occupied by Learning Curve. And to the west, this area here this is the previous residential development. It will become clear when we show the plans from the previous schemes. So this parcel here relates to the parcel of open space, which is for the full planning permission. So just in terms of the aerial image, as you can see, the site currently has an undeveloped grassed over appearance. Most of these houses have been constructed by now, including these ones here, which don't show the image. The last parcel relates to this site here, which is Plot D, which is 39 bungalows are currently under construction by Living and almost been completed. And this is just an aerial image from 2001, so before the approved master plan took place. So this is the Black & Decker factory, which was demolished and previously as part of the redevelopment of the site. As we can see, this is clearly an industrial use. It's located outside of the main built-up area of Spennymoor, and it was in this context that the original master plan was approved. And so it was the case that the residential development was intended to help fund the replacement of the jobs associated with this sort of industrial use here. So this was the original master plan submitted with the original application for the mixed-use redevelopment of the site. So what we can see is sort of a roughly an even split. So the residential development is located to the west of the site, and then the grey buildings would indicate the office uses, with the yellow and the red indicating some restaurant and retail uses. primarily we can see the split is between residential and commercial. In 2015, a subsequent application was submitted to vary the approved planned condition, and essentially what this did was increase the amount of land to be used by residential. So the difference, as we can see, is this area is now shown and how has planning permission and has been built out for residential development, which relates to this area here. It's approximately 2.5 hectares in size, and this has allowed the applicant to, or the landowner, to increase it. So there wasn't an additional increase in the number of dwellings, but it allowed a reduction in the density, which allowed sort of larger properties with larger gardens, more lucrative to come forward. The application site is this area here, which is still indicated for office use at that time. So we go on to the indicative layout plan, which has been provided as part of the application. And we can see that the application site is now proposed to be come forward as dwellings. So the application site it's allocated employment land. The site itself measures about 3.7 hectares, and it forms a larger parcel of employment land, which is 4.9 hectares in area. So this is the only office, the living office, to have come forward to date. So in terms of the indicative layout, it is only indicative because the application is outlined at this stage. All matters are reserved apart from access. So we've got 2 new vehicular access points from Arlington Way, and as well as a footpath connection to the northwest of the site. We've got a new area of green space proposed here, termed Green Space 3, Greenspan 3. And we've got industrial uses to the north. This is the Boots Distribution Centre, which currently is thought to operate 24 hours a day, and the Durham Police Dog Training School. So as part of the mitigation for the noise requirements, there is a 4-metre high acoustic barrier proposed to span the northern boundary of the site. So this is relating to the full detailed consent part of the application. So as part of the previous applications for residential development, we've approved areas of open space. So this north to south bit, which runs north to south, is known as Greenspan 1. This physically connects to this second space, Greenspan 2, which runs east to west. And this is the area that we're seeking the applicant is seeking full detailed consent for. As part of the current application, a new area of open space would be created. This is Greenspan 3. And as we can see, while these 2 spines are physically connected, this green spine is separated by the highway. And in order to access Greenspan 2 from Greenspan 3, with avoiding going through the car park, which has been built in this area here, you would have to walk sort of all the way up and around to access the existing landscaping. So this is just a planting plan that's been provided. Details of trees and hedgerows that would be planted to the open space, as well as the play equipment. So onto some site photographs. This is taken from Arlington View, looking east across the site. This again, the view northeast, looking towards the industrial uses to the north of the site from Arlington Way. The new access would essentially use this turning head which has been provided there. This is taken from a point further north at Arlington Way, again looking east across the site. So we've got some existing trees, but you can still just about see the Boots Distribution Centre to the left-hand side. And then this is standing from the northeast of the corner of the site, looking south, and we can just about see the living offices to this area here. And this is the view from the south, looking northeast towards the living offices and the associated car parking area. So in terms of consultative responses, Spennymoor Town Council have submitted a letter of support following the publication of the committee report. I understand the speakers here to elaborate on some of those sort of reasons later on. The lead local flood authority have objected to the application on the grounds that SUDs haven't been designed to form an intrinsic part of the layout, and that has consequences in terms of a lack of treatment of surface water. Spatial Policy have advised that it hasn't been demonstrated that there is no longer a demand for employment uses on the site, which is contrary to Policy 2 of the County Durham Plan. Business Durham have objected to the application as they consider that there is demand for smaller office units, and they cite several recent examples across the county of this. They also suggest that the market for smaller industrial units, so B2 and B8, is also strong, and that is covered by the employment allocation. Environmental Health have raised concerns over the principle of introducing residential development in this particular site, given the close proximity to existing industrial and noise-generating uses. And Design and Landscape Officers have also raised concerns through the Council's design review process regarding elements of the layout, and while layout is a reserved matter, there are certain aspects of the site that we believe would prejudice or prevent a suitable residential development coming forward, particularly in terms of the 4-metre high acoustic barrier, which we consider would have quite a visually overbearing impact, and the lack of connectivity between the green spines. In terms of public responses, we've publicised the application in the usual ways, and we've received 7 letters of support. These have been around people considering that the site would be more appropriate for residential uses than industrial, the benefits of providing additional open space, as well as additional residents helping to support existing businesses. And Councillor Malloy has opposed the application on the grounds of the loss of employment land, and I believe he's also registered to speak. So in summary, the application site relates to a parcel of land which is allocated in the County Durham Plan for employment uses. County Durham Plan, so Policy 2 states is only permissible towards the development of allocated employment sites for non-employment uses where documented evidence can be provided that active and unsuccessful and active marketing has taken place to demonstrate that there isn't a demand for employment uses on the site. So essentially, there's 2 factors involved here. The first one is office uses. So this was originally, the original master plan indicated that this site was going to be brought forward for office uses. We don't believe that the applicant sort of suggests that there isn't a demand for offices. Business Durham tell us differently, and their experience is different, and they suggest that there is a demand for offices, for smaller units in particular. And we would also sort of suggest that the site hasn't been sort of adequately marketed for employment uses. The master plan on the Durham Gate website actually highlights the site for point 31 on the key is new homes in planning 113. So it's not rather than office use as it should have been marketed as. And the display boards that have been erected outside the site have only ever referred to housing. They haven't ever displayed or advertised the possibility of employment uses being brought forward on the site. It's also worth noting that Durham Gate North, which is located to the north of the site, about 400 metres away, they recently constructed office units there, which are now occupied by Learning Curve, which again suggests that maybe there is a demand for offices. And then secondly, the land is allocated for employment uses, which covers office use as well as B2 and B8 uses, so more general industrial and storage and distribution uses. And there's no evidence that the applicants ever explored seriously bringing forward those uses on the site. And again, Business Durham has advised us that the market for smaller industrial units on the site is strong. So ultimately, the proposals will result in the loss of employment land. We don't believe that there's sufficient evidence to demonstrate that there isn't a demand for employment land. The site was originally promised, well, the master plan originally promised to bring forward 8.2 hectares approximately of employment land. If this application was to be approved, there could only potentially be 1.7 hectares of employment land brought forward. And going back to the aerial image in 2001, the whole premise of the original master plan was that the housing would help to fund the jobs and the employment uses that would come forward on this application site. And apart from the Living Office to the south, no reserved matters application has come forward for any employment uses. So we're strongly of the view that the proposals are contrary to County Durham Plan Policy 2. We've also got other concerns regarding the application, particularly in terms of noise and living conditions for the future residents. So the site is within very close proximity of existing industrial and noise generating uses, particularly the Boots Distribution Centre and the Police Dog Training School. Environmental Health have advised us that they have received and investigated complaints in relation to the Boots Distribution Centre in the past, and this relates to complaints from the residents to the west of the site as part of the previous development at Durham Gate. And they've advised that given it's difficult to quantify the impacts of noise from dogs barking and the tonal types of noise from reverse vehicle movements is going to have an adverse impact on the amenity of the future residents in this location. The applicant proposes a 4-metre high sort of acoustic barrier as mitigation for this. However, we don't believe that that's a practical solution. There's concerns over sort of the visual appearance of that in terms of an overbearing impact, as well as practicalities in terms of maintenance and how that's going to be managed to ensure that noise is going to be mitigated sort of for the future. And as well as, because the dwellings would be located in such close proximity to the noise generating uses, whilst mechanical extract ventilation is proposed to be installed to all of the dwellings, the residents wouldn't be able to open their windows without suffering from unacceptably high noise levels. In addition to that, there's also the potential for the future residents to place unreasonable restrictions on the existing businesses because they're located in so close proximity, and potential for complaints in that regard. So overall, we're of the view that it wouldn't be possible for a satisfactory scheme to come forward that would safeguard the amenity and the living conditions of the future occupants if dwellings were to come forward on this site. And this is contrary to policies 29 and 31 of the County Durham Plan. In terms of design and the layout is a reserved matter. So whilst we've shown the indicative layout plan provided as part of this application, that would be subject to change if the application were to be approved and a reserved matters application were to come forward. However, we have to be confident that a suitable layout could come forward. And as we've mentioned, in terms of the 4-metre high acoustic barrier and the lack of connectivity between the green spines, we don't believe that a suitable layout could come forward. And so when we've assessed the application against sort of the Council's Building for Life supplementary plan document at design review, the scheme scored fairly poorly, receiving 4 red scores, and in line with policy 29 of the County Durham Plan, it indicates that unless there's significant overriding reasons, the application should be refused. And we don't believe there are any significant overriding reasons in this instance, which is contrary to policy 29. And in terms of drainage, the Leeds Local Flood Authority have raised serious concerns over the application, particularly in terms of the lack of SUDs, and the policy requirement is to provide SUDs as an intrinsic part of the layout for major developments. This hasn't been the case for this application. Essentially, the concern relates to the amount of dwellings that are proposed, and there's not sufficient space to provide the required SUDs. And this has knock-on effects for the treatment of surface water runoff, and issues of water quality and potential for sort of pollutants, sort of downstream effects. Overall, it's contrary to policy 35. So subject to these 4 refusal reasons, which are set out in the committee report, we are recommending the refusal of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, George. Now we've got 3 members. Can you not wait for questions till we've...
Yes, thank you very much. George, when Councillor Patricia Joplin from Crook Division, when it goes, you say it goes against the County Durham Plan because it's for obviously employment use, and it does. Can you tell me when that plan was done? I understand, I think somewhere in the notes, you'd done some sort of exercise to find out whether we needed, how much employment land we need. Is that correct?
Yeah, so at the time it was the Sedgeborough District Local Plan that was in force, and under that plan the site was allocated as employment use as well. And the County Durham Plan obviously is now in place, and as part of that process the Council has produced an employment land review which has assessed the need for employment uses across the county, and following that review, when the inspector has sort of examined the County Durham Plan and Policy 2 in particular, they've come to the view that Policy 2 is sort of, I suppose, sound, and that the application site should be included within the employment allocations, so there is a need for it, essentially.
Moving on, we've got a Spennymoor Town Councillor to speak, Ian Geldart, followed by 2 local members, Peter Malloy and Liz. You have been accepted. You 3 will have unlimited time, and I would hope that you would not be longer than 10 minutes each, and that maybe you wouldn't go over the same things 3 different ways. I hope you've got something different to add. So Ian, over to you, please.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and good morning, members. I'm addressing the committee this morning as the current Town Mayor of Spennymoor on behalf of Spennymoor Town Council, who are in support of the application today. I myself am the Town Councillor for the Tudor Ward, which has within it the entire Durham Gate development. Indeed, my own home is only 700 yards from the proposed site of the application today, so it is my hope that I can provide a very local perspective this morning. Whilst it's our belief that issues around water drainage, noise and other matters can and should be addressed through sensible conditions on this application's approval, I note that the primary reason for recommendation to refuse today is the apparent loss of employment land. The world has changed significantly since the initial consideration of Durham Gate 15 years ago, and indeed so has the immediate area. What were called empty new builds back then now form a warm, thriving community filled with hundreds of new Spennymoor residents with their own residents association and organising significant community events at Durham Gate. And what was a large empty area of our town with very few jobs has now been significantly developed with new large units at both Durham Gate North and around the Flintford roundabout. There are now hundreds of extra jobs in the immediate area, in a stark contrast in 2008 when this particular field was deemed much more important for employment. Employment opportunities have developed around the same strategic area, but more importantly, they're ever so slightly further away from the residential areas than this site. Without any doubt in my mind, the development of Durham Gate over the last 15 years has been one of the most significant changes to Spennymoor. As we look towards its future and indeed its overall completion, we must maintain a good balance. And my main point this morning is to provide a local perspective on this matter, that this balance is better maintained by allowing the building of houses on this field than to introduce more industrial use so close to the wonderful community that has been created here. In saying that, and again through my local experience, I do not believe that the current industrial land around this particular site would cause future residents the nuisance or suggested poor living conditions to the extent that's been displayed, and on balance the greater risk is to the current residents of a future expansion of industrial use on this particular site. Even that said, without the proposed development today, it is my opinion that the site would sit empty for many years to come, as it has done, which would be a massive shame for a part of the town that has become so vibrant and important. Whenever we consider planning, it's always my firm belief that the voices of local residents are paramount, and having heard that the Durham Gate Residents Association would much prefer a modest extension of their community onto this particular site, I'm urging today that members consider that this application can be approved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. Well done. On time scale anyway, thank you. Just a question at this point for you, for myself. On the agenda, which was only maybe a week ago, Spennymoor Town Council have no response received. I'm just thinking you were speaking on behalf of Spennymoor Town Council, weren't you?
Yes, that's correct, Chairman. We only considered the matter at the last meeting. We've had a few administrative issues which have meant that they hadn't got to the Council's agenda until last week.
Thank you. That clears it up for myself. Now over to Peter Malloy. When you're ready, Pete.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Pete Malloy, representing the Spennymoor Division. The planning application before you this morning has a provision within it for 96 residential properties which are to be built on land that is earmarked for employment on the Durham Gate site located in the Tudhoe Division. Tudhoe Division is adjacent to the division I represent, and like the Spennymoor Division, it is part of the Spennymoor Parish. And even though I understand why the Durham Gate Residents Association have submitted a letter of support for this planning application, I feel there is a need to look at the bigger picture and see what effect the potential loss of land earmarked for employment could have on Spennymoor as a whole. With the building of new housing estates on former employment sites such as the former Thorns and Electrolux off the B6288, I feel that Spennymoor is not in a position to lose any land in the parish that is designated for employment. With the close proximity of the new build commercial development site off the A167 at Thinford, which has attracted national companies such as Screwfix and Toolstation, it is shown businesses can be attracted to this area of Spennymoor, and as a result, there is a good argument to keep this land for employment and not to lose it to residential properties. The above-mentioned earmarked employment land could also be an option for existing local businesses in locations such as Tudhoe Industrial Estate that may grow out of their current business premises but want to remain in the Spennymoor area to relocate to, and with the results being the keeping of jobs in the local area and potentially create more jobs. In the committee report at paragraph 52, there is an objection from Business Durham because they consider it is an exaggeration to say that office development is not possible at Durhamgate, and advise that in their experience the market for smaller office units remains strong and that demand for industrial units has outstripped supply in recent years. Paragraph 99 of the report provides a summary of the earmarked employment land, in that the land has been identified for housing for a number of years on the applicant's master plan contained on their Durhamgate website, and it has not been demonstrated that all employment uses have been seriously explored. As well as the seemingly lack of effort in promoting the land for employment use, the report has also identified other issues with the proposed development. For example, that due to the proximity of the site to existing industrial and noise generating uses, future occupants of the proposed dwellings could suffer from unacceptable living conditions and substandard levels of residential amenity, whilst it's also likely that unreasonable restrictions would be placed upon adjacent industrial use in the future. The proposed development is considered to represent poor design when assessed against the County Durham Plan Building for Life supplementary planning documents, and it has not been demonstrated that the proposals have been designed to incorporate the management of water as an intrinsic part of the overall development, nor that pollutants from surface water runoff would be sufficiently treated prior to leaving the site to avoid causing a pollution risk downstream. It is because of the above issues that the recommendation in the report is for this planning application to be refused due to being unacceptable and in conflict with policies 2, 29, 31 and 35 of the County Durham Plan and Part 6, 12, 14 and 15 of the National Planning Policy Framework. In recent years, there has been a lot of new residential properties built in Spennymoor that the town could be mistaken as being just one big housing estate where folks live but go to work elsewhere in the county and the wider region. Therefore, I ask the committee to put an end to Spennymoor becoming just one big housing estate and help safeguard the earmarked employment land for potential future employment opportunities by accepting the report's recommendation and vote to refuse the planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Pete. Liz, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here today as a member of Durham County Council. I'm also a town councillor, but I haven't participated in any meetings at the town council or in any decisions. And Spennymoor Town Council have given a view on this particular development. I was a member of the old Setchfield Borough Council when the Durhamgate area was placed onto a planning application. The decision to expand on the Durhamgate site was made when the new unitary authority took over from Setchfield Borough Council. At that point, when this development was being considered, we were informed that there would be 6,000 jobs created as a result of the expansion of this site after we lost the Black & Decker industry on this area. Those jobs did not materialise. The report mentions with regard to living as actually creating jobs. We already had the established living on a site in Spennymoor, and they moved to the new location on Durhamgate. It did not create a great deal of extra employment for the area, as we already had them in our area. As regard to the expansion onto what is designated currently as employment land, I do believe that this is quite unacceptable in that right from the start of the Durham Gate expansion into the area, we have been given promises on this expansion, which has not materialised. For a long time, we had displays on the Durham Gate site which showed that there would be a gateway of shops and various other material things that did not, we did not get at all. That area of land was turned into houses. We don't have the infrastructure in the town to add all of the extra houses that are being planned, including this 96 houses. There is a lack of services in the town, particularly doctors, dentists. On that basis, I do support everything that Councillor Malloy has said as well, and I do believe that the committee should consider the views of the officers of the council and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz, and to the three of you. We have, excuse me, we have no objectors, so it's on to the supporters stroke applicant, and we'll start with the applicant's agent, Joe Robinson. Sorry, I should just say, you have written down that you've got 5 minutes, but we've stretched that to 6, so you've got 2 each, and Amanda to date is, we'll let you know when you have 30 seconds left.
Hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can all hear me. I'll try and be as loud as I can. I'll try and shout. I'm going to get straight to it. As set out in the case officer's report and the presentation, the Planning Authority are recommending 4 reasons for refusal, and these relate to the employment allocation, noise, design and drainage. I'll go through each of these matters in turn. However, we're firmly of the opinion that as this is an outline application with all matters reserved apart from access, 3 of the reasons for refusal relating to noise, design and drainage are premature, and we can appropriately address these at reserved matter stage when the proposals can be fully reviewed by the Planning Authority, the consultees and the Planning Committee at the right time, and once we have advanced the design at detailed stage. We acknowledge that the site is allocated for employment use in the local plan, and therefore the proposed residential use does represent a departure from the policy allocation. However, there is compelling justification as to why employment use is no longer appropriate on this site. The site has been actively marketed in accordance with the policy requirements for office use, which is in line with the approved use as set out in the wider Durham Gate Master Plan, approved in 2009, and its updated planning permission in 2015. There has been no interest in the approved use of the site for almost 15 years, and this is unlikely to change. The LPA are of the view that the site should also be marketed.
30 seconds remain.
Wow. Should also be marketed for wider employment uses, including warehousing. But as demonstrated by the approved Durham Gate Master Plan, it's never been the intention for the site to be used for industrial or warehousing. A quieter use is now needed here to protect the amenity of existing residents. To put industrial use in this location now is contradictory based on the council's assertions that the proposal in front of you will create amenity issues in this location. I'll stop there. I've got quite a bit more, but I will stop there.
Thank you very much, Joe. Next, we've got, for the applicant or the applicant himself, I'm not sure, Dean Cook. We all on this committee received an email from you yesterday. I could only say that I myself, once I read the outline of it, didn't read the rest of it, because that's what this meeting is about. So you've got 2 minutes as well, Dean. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak today. I'd also like to thank Councillor Ian Geldard, who you've just heard from earlier, who spoke kindly on behalf of Spennymoor Town Council. My name is Dean Cook. I'm the Managing Director of Arlington Real Estate, the developer of the County Durham mixed-use community at Durham Gate. Those who don't know the area, it's located 5 miles south of Durham City Centre, and Durham Gate is a thriving community that stands on the site of the former Black & Decker factory on the edge of Spennymoor. I've personally been involved in the creation of Durham Gate since my early 20s, and it's become a huge passion and gives me enormous sense of pride to transform what was a dilapidated industrial site into an established community that's there now. The project has not been without its challenges, most notably in 2008 and the global financial crash, subsequent recessions following, and of course most recently the pandemic, which have obviously influenced the evolution of the master plan on Durham Gate today. However, since 2005, we've been delivering on our vision to grow a thriving, vibrant business and residential community, which currently has created 680 homes for more than 1,500 residents, and the latest homes to be delivered on the site are 39 affordable bungalows for over 55s, which are currently being delivered by Living Housing. Durham Gate is also the location for over 40 companies,
30 seconds remaining,
totalling over 1,300 employees and attracting £100 million of private investment to the area of Spennymoor. Just to note, the original employee numbers on the Stanley Black & Decker site originally was just over 2,000. We have welcomed prominent employers to Durham Gate, including housing provider Living, nationally recognised training organisation Learning Curve, and most recently Breed & Group, all of which play a role in our society locally and across the region. These are housed in over 50,000 square feet of new commercial space that we have delivered at Durham Gate. In addition to those businesses...
Thank you, Dean. Can you make that your last sentence, please?
Yeah, sorry. Thank you very much.
Okay, it's over to Paul Thompson, and you'll have the same 2 minutes. I know it seems cruel, but that's the rules.
Good morning, Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Thompson. I'm here on behalf of the Durham Gate Residents Association. And in relation to what we see, we, as a residents association and people that reside in the area, would much prefer to see that piece of land used as residential development as opposed to industrial development. If you look at the plan up there, you can see that it fits perfectly in line with the rest of the housing that is on. As has been mentioned before, we have a very vibrant and a very close-knit community, commented on by many people that there's not anything like it in the Spennymoor area, and by increasing the residential development will only increase that community. We have people from outside of the area come to our events, so by adding housing to that, I think it's only a positive for the area, and as a residents association we're fully supportive, and as a person that lives there myself, I'm fully supportive of having this land developed as residential rather than industrial. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, and you did it well within your time scale. Well done, Paul. George, do you want to come back on anything?
Yeah, just to come back on a couple of things. So I think we do acknowledge that the application is in outline with layout, design, land, appearance, landscaping as reserved matters. But we need to be satisfied that sort of a suitable layout could come forward if this application was to be approved. So it's not just, I don't think it's as simple as saying we could just put conditions on. I think it has to be demonstrated that a suitable layout for 96 dwellings on this site could come forward if we were to grant planning permission. And as we sort of set out, given the sort of the existing uses to the north, you know, they're not going anywhere. They're already operating from that site. They're already generating certain noise from the activities that they undertake. In our view, there's going to be a noise impact, and I don't really think that there's any feasible mitigation that could adequately address that. Likewise with the drainage concerns, sort of our drainage engineers have advised us that there isn't space to accommodate 96 dwellings on the site and sufficient amount of suds to ensure the adequate treatment of surface water. So if we were to grant planning permission for this application today, it would be on the basis that 96 dwellings could come forward, and then there is a conflict in terms of what suds could come forward at a later date. In terms of, yeah, it was mentioned again that the original master plan was intended to come forward for office use, which again we would acknowledge. However, that was one form of development that was considered to be acceptable at that time. It doesn't necessarily say that B2 and B8 uses wouldn't be acceptable just because office uses were approved at that time. And as we've sort of set out, we have undertaken sort of an employment land review as part of the County Durham Plan adoptions process, which sets out the need for employment uses across the county, and it's allocated ultimately in the plan for all employment uses. So formerly B1, now Class E officers, B2 and B8, and so that's the policy requirement rather than the master plan. And I think also in terms of how the site's been marketed, I mean, the applicants obviously got their view and we've got our view, and members will come to their own view. However, sort of no reserve matters applications has come forward for the application site to develop it as office use, and in our view, if such an application were to have come forward, that may have given some companies a bit more confidence to come forward and show a bit more interest in sort of occupying the site from an employment basis. So I'll leave it there for now, but happy to take any questions.
Simon, you have a question for George.
Yeah, it's just to do with the report, and it does appear to be a typo. It's just to get the clarification on paragraph 219. Yeah, at the very end it says there are no, you've given reasons why it's unacceptable in conflict, but it says there are no material considerations which indicate a decision should be otherwise, and therefore the application is recommended for approval. It's just to find out exactly what that...
Yeah, that is a typo. It is recommended for refusal, just to clarify that, yeah.
Tricia, you want a word with George, please?
Thank you. George, quite a lot has been made about the industrial side of this. Can you tell me, all industrial sites have different clarifications, don't they? So, you know, light industry, heavy... what is this site? Is it... because you get the impression there's going to be huge noise, huge this, smells, whatever, because they're pushing industrial. Can you tell me the actual clarification on this site? What use would it be? Would it cover? Would it cover, as you said, offices? Would it cover light manufacturing? What is the actual use on that piece of land? I think that would be very helpful for the committee to know that.
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately it covers all of them. So the allocation in the County Durham plan is for employment uses. It doesn't specify that it's only for office or it's only for light manufacturing or it's only for storage and distribution. It just covers sort of a blanket, all employment uses. So whilst we wouldn't necessarily be sort of advocating sort of a large general manufacturing unit to come forward on the site, given the proximity to existing residents, there might be scope for some smaller scale sort of light manufacturing units to come forward, potentially siting them sort of to the eastern side of the site and have some offices to the western side, to try and balance that. I mean, anything that was going to come forward would obviously have to demonstrate that it wasn't going to have an impact on the existing residents. I mean, that would be on a case-by-case basis, but I don't think it should be discounted that sort of some form of other sort of either with office or other employment use couldn't come forward just because there's residents in close proximity.
Obviously, when that comes forward, the housing estate next to it would be taken into account, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely it would. Yeah. And obviously the County Durham plan has gone through its examination process, and at that time there would have been opportunity to comment on sort of the allocation for employment land. So it's something that residents would have been aware of, that it was allocated for employment land, and obviously it's always been sort of intended to come forward for offices anyway.
Do we have any figures on how many jobs have been created so far? Because I think that's quite important as well.
In terms of by the existing Durham Gate developments?
Yes, yes.
I don't have any to hand. I don't know whether the applicant wants to come back on that.
All right, thanks very much.
Sorry, just to answer that, yes. Approximately we've got over 1,300 jobs on the Durham Gate.
1,300.
Yeah.
Thank you for the questions for George. Do any members have any questions for the speakers today? Yes, Sam.
The problem that I foresee is the volume of the houses, the 96 that you touch on, George, in this application. If that figure was to be reduced, would we still be looking at the same conditions for refusal, with a problem with the water and the noise levels? Is it the volume of the houses that is the actual problem here? And if there was a reduction, we'll say 50 houses, would we still be debating the conditions for refusal?
So, yeah, there's a couple of things, a couple of issues, I suppose. So the principal issue is that we think that there's a conflict with policy too, in terms of the loss of employment land. So regardless of how many houses come forward on the site, in our view, there is a conflict there, which we would recommend refusal of the application for. In terms of the drainage issue, I think in particular, I think if they were to reduce the amount of houses to fit SUDS on, then I think there is scope to overcome that issue. But the principal issue in terms of the loss of employment land would remain. I mean, as with the noise issue, if dwellings were proposed sort of in close proximity to the northern boundary. But the principal issue of loss of employment land would remain.
Thank you. Any further questions from members for the speakers this morning? No? Well, you've all got off light. It's now open to the committee to discuss this and debate it. Who would like to go first? Jim, you just by a fraction, and then Craig.
Chair, I find myself agreeing with the Town Council, the Mayor and the Residents Association on this one. I mean, I see an opportunity here. If you put 96 dwellings on there, you're going to put 96 families in the dwellings. So they'll come with mortgages, jobs, all kind of economic benefits. They'll all be paying national insurance, council tax. If we look at what it's been doing in the past, we don't see anything at all. Like 14 years of missed opportunities, and even the advice coming from Business Durham is the industrial, the units, the office, they haven't turned up. And are they going to turn up in the future? But you put the houses on there, and then, you know, as I say, an economy boost would just turn up straight away, just filling the houses up, and everything that comes with that, with the people that go into them, not to mention the intellectual property that goes in there as well, because these people, you know, they've got jobs, they've got good jobs. They'll be able to service that trading estate and many, many more trading estates round about Durham. That's what it comes with people, and people are very, very valuable these days. They can't get enough. They can't get enough of them. There's jobs everywhere looking for people. And for these types of property, as I say, there'd be intellectual property comes with it. They'll be able to service many areas and pay the costs and raise the economy in that area as well. I mean, as far as noise is concerned, you know, I think they obviously mentioned opening your windows. You know, nobody opens the windows at night. Most noise is going on during the day, and people deal with that. But as far as I can see a tremendous economic benefit from 96 properties going on there, from looking at a space that's done nothing for 14 years and hasn't achieved what it set out to achieve, even though it's been marketing to achieve that. So as I say, I find myself in support of the application. I'll listen to what other people have to say, but as far as I'm concerned, I would be voting against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Jim. Craig Martin, please.
Thank you. I stated Craig Martin, councillor for North Lodge in Chester Street. Councillor Atkinson, I can assure you that I do open my windows at night and welcome the fresh air when I'm sleeping and the lack of noise within my community. I just want to challenge two of the kind of big anecdotal pieces of evidence that are being kind of thrown around this debate. Firstly, employment land. So I sit on the board of the Drum Business Part. Well, I say about the kind of business group that works alongside it. Similar to this, it has good access links to the A1. It is chocker whenever a unit becomes available. It is immediately snatched up. I understand that both sides of the argument, you could argue Business Durham have maybe anecdotal evidence from their experiences. I'm strongly of the belief that Business Durham is right. There is a need of units for employment, and particularly for smaller units. This idea that there isn't a need for it, I can assure members from my experiences in the business area, it is, and COVID hasn't affected that. I would argue, because in actual fact, COVID actually kind of hammering the kind of retail and hospitality industries, but in actual fact, the kind of business-to-business organisations that exist, they're doing all right, and they are expanding across County Durham. You know, I fully appreciate the sort of need for housing, members, but we as a county, whenever you look at the stats for employment, we are always at the bottom of those league tables. We have a higher level of unemployment. And I appreciate that the reasons behind that are much more complex than just jobs. But for us to kind of refuse employment land, you know, we need more jobs. We need to provide more people with employability options to be able to get them to improve their lives. You know, it's all right buildings, but they need the jobs as well. Secondly, I want to challenge the concept of the noise. Like I said, my patch has a fairly large business park. It has a distribution centre, like the Boots one for the Co-op that runs for the north of England. And even though in my patch there is a significant barrier, horticulture barrier, between that and the actual kind of industrial unit, I still get plenty of complaints about noise issues. Putting them that close, I can assure you, members, that putting people close to a distribution centre will generate a lot of noise, even with that 4-metre baffle thing. And there's an argument here that sort of says, well, you know, those residents are going to make a choice in living there. But we all know that when the housing developer builds their houses, they will not be upfront telling residents, oh, by the way, you're going to be buying a property next to an industrial unit that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And to make it worse, by the way, with these units, is that it's not internal distribution centres. There's a lot of stuff going on the outside and lorry movements and HGV units. It is not a quiet operation. So by approving this application, we'll be subjecting a community to have to live with this, whether they knew about it or not know about it. And we all know, trying to convince planning, there's an issue with noise. There's quite a high bar to kind of get them to actually do anything. So when they come to us and say, there's going to be a problem, you know there's going to be a really big noise problem. So the big reason I will be proposing that we support the officer's recommendations, and the big reason for that is that this application prevents the creation of extra jobs. And not only that, the nail in the coffin is that the officers here are saying is that by building houses here, it would harm and put additional restrictions on the organisations that are already in place in this area. You know, the Boots, the Dog and other organisations will have built those and put millions of pounds of investment going, well, there's no houses anywhere near here. There's not going to be any houses being built anytime soon. We're going to be safe. We're not causing a problem. We would harm them with the restrictions that environmental health would have to put on them. So I feel very strongly, Chair, that we should accept the officer's recommendation and that this should be refused.
Thank you, Craig, and that was a proposal for refusal, wasn't it?
Yes, as in accepting the officer's recommendations would be refused.
Yes. Patricia.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I tend to agree with Craig here. We are going to, if we gave permission, you'd have 96 dwellings, bringing the same amount of families onto that site. Those families, remember we're looking at climate change. As a committee, we have to look at climate change. Those families are going to have to travel to go to work because the employment's just not there. Now, if we want to encourage people to come into an area and find employment, we need employment sites. Now, this is already allocated. It's quite clear it's allocated by the amount of policies it goes against. Another thing that we've really got to consider is if that was built, those poor people that are moving into those houses with drainage problems, we all know that the climate is not going to get any drier. It's just going to get wetter. And to be quite frank with you, we have got to take cognizance of all the problems that's been pointed out in this application. We need jobs. Durham is becoming more acceptable for manufacturers and small industry and small units to come to. We want to make those welcome. The smaller units are just as important as huge manufacturing because it gives you local employment. You know, local people start up small business and they employ locally. And that is something I think that as a committee we should be looking at more often. And to me, this goes against so many policies that I've got written down here, at least 5 I've got, that I don't see how we can approve it, personally. If it had been just one policy or 2 policies or something that we could get over, I can't see how we can get over it. It's a large development, already on a large development, and I'm of a mind to go with Craig, Councillor Martin on this, and if that was a proposal, I'd second it.
Thank you, Patricia. Noted you down as a seconder. Kevin Shaw, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of issues here that I'm really struggling to get my head around. I mean, if we look at the current layout of the site, compatibility, the only future delivery that I can see on there is to extend the existing housing. If we consider the current residents who are in support of this, they would far rather have housing on the site than have the problems associated with it being used for a commercial use. The housing need in County Durham, I'm trying to be calm and considered here because I do get angry at times. The housing need in County Durham is absolutely massive. So much so that when I was the housing portfolio holder, we couldn't even start to address the outstanding need to such an extent that we had to start building our own homes again. Here we've got a developer who's offering the opportunity to deliver much needed homes in a setting which is absolutely perfect for it, and also, you know, to be building bungalows. The constant conversation that we have that cannot be satisfied is the viability when we put a housing development forward of delivering bungalows on a site. It's a very, very difficult thing to be able to deliver. And in regards to it being used for future commercial use, it's been standing empty for 15 years. I don't exactly see a huge line or a list of people coming forward who want to occupy the site on a commercial basis. If that had been obvious and it's gone through a 15-year cycle, that would have been one of the first things that would have manifested itself. I don't know whether Jim's moved it forward as a proposal to accept this application. If he hasn't, I would like to move forward and state that I accept this application for its future use to be used as housing. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, can I jump in? Thank you. Yeah, I think it's just worth pointing out a couple of things and just the conversation, if that's okay. I think the issue here is I understand the concerns about wanting to deliver housing, and that's definitely an important factor for planning to consider. However, there are a number of other housing sites in Spennymoor that have sort of been committed. So Councillor Malloy in his presentation mentioned the former Electrolux site, sort of at Merrington Lane. There was sort of 400 odd more than that houses at that particular site. There's a couple of allocated housing sites in and around Spennymoor as well. The difficulty we have here is if we approve planning permission for housing on this site, that's the end of the employment land. That's essentially gone and we won't get that back. But there are other housing sites that could potentially come forward elsewhere within Spennymoor to help meet that demand. Also worth pointing out that the council can demonstrate a sort of a 5-year supply of available and deliverable housing land as well. In terms of noise problems for the existing residents as well, it's worth pointing out that the existing these houses here turn their back on the application site. So they face this way, you've got a gable end, these properties here. So the front the properties don't face directly onto the industrial or the application site. So we do believe that there would be scope for sort of an acceptable employment uses to come forward on the application site without having an adverse impact on the amenity of the existing residents to the west. That's all.
Could I come back in there, Chair? I totally understand what the senior planning officer is saying, but we hate to consider this application and not others that may be running simultaneous with this. And again, just addressing the outstanding need, we've got 11,000 people on waiting lists trying to get into affordable housing. We've got 3,500 people who are waiting to move into bungalows. I just struggle to get my head around things at times.
Chair, thank you. If I can just come in just to clarify, I think, some of the points which have been raised in terms of the debate so far today. I think just to support what George was saying in response to the points from Councillor Atkinson and Shaw, absolutely, as planning officers, we completely understand the importance of bringing housing into our communities, and I think there's a number of communities across the county which have developed positively over the years through housing-led regeneration. So I fully support what Councillor Shaw is saying there, but I think it is a valid point, looking at each planning application on its merits. When you look at the amount of new housing that we have had in Spennymoor over the years, Spennymoor has had significantly more housing than a good number of similar sized settlements, and I think, as George referred to before, there are existing allocations to be used up first, and there are a number of planning applications in the system at present, and whilst technically we probably cannot give any weight to some of those other planning applications because they haven't been determined positively by planning committee, I think we're a long way off getting to the scenario that there's a housing shortage in Spennymoor. I think the key determinant for me, Chair, and again a point that George raised in the presentation, you know, the sites allocated in the county plan for employment, for jobs, and it's a fundamental part of the planning system and the county plan to meet a lot of socio-economic aims. That includes housing delivery, it includes protection of the environment, but it also includes allocating land for jobs. I think, as George set out in his presentation, there's been a significant history to this site, and the intention both from the original Sedgefield Borough Master Plan and I think more importantly in terms of the decision, Chair, that members have to make today in terms of what's in the County Durham plan, is that the housing has already been delivered. We've had the housing. In many respects that was enabling development. As we set out in the report, Section 106 monies was waived from a number of the housing sites in the past on the premise that asking for Section 106 money from those sites would potentially hinder the delivery of jobs. So I think it's somewhat surprising today to find a scenario put to us that we can no longer deliver the jobs. In terms of the viability of the employment uses, I think it was a fair point raised by the residents there, that bearing in mind the success of the housing to the west, can we still deliver employment uses on the site without being detrimental to the existing users? Well, absolutely, that's a very fair point, and again, George and the team have done a lot of work on this. If the employment allocation was for heavy industry, you know, the heavy polluting industry, metal bashing and the like, then I think we would potentially, Chair, I think officers would have looked at this again. But again, as George said out in his presentation, it's not. It's for the full range of employment uses. And putting the old B1 employment uses, the light industry, the offices, the trade parks and the like, on that land, I've no doubt that that arrangement will be no different to any other number of employment and housing sites around the county. And I think, sorry, the final point I'd just like to make, Chair, I think Councillor Atkinson suggested that Business Durham were in support of housing. I think paragraph 52 of the report in front of members, Chair, makes it absolutely clear that that's not the case. And from my experience, I have to put this forward to a committee, Chair. I've had 2 meetings with private sector businesses over the last month. One of them located very close to this site and the other only half a mile to the east, and both report a very vibrant and positive employment market in the area. And again, clearly it's for members to take their own view in terms of the robustness of the marketing evidence that has been put forward by the applicant today. But I think, as George pointed out in the presentation, it seems a little bit odd to us as officers when sale boards have been up on the site and marketing material produced to show the allocation for housing when that's not the case. So I hope that clarifies some of the key planning issues, Chair.
Thank you for that. It's Alan Bell next, please.
Thank you, George. Yeah, going on the back of Councillor Craig Martin's proposal there, these in Chelsea Street, sorry, just briefly going away from here, if you end up with no employment sites, you end up with a town like we have in Chelsea Street, where we don't have, where literally very little employment sites, and residents unfortunately have to use the cars or public transport, or if it's not on strike, use public transport and travel out of town to their jobs. Here, like, we've got an employment site. If this is removed from the plan, you know, that's the risk that will happen in Spennymoor, where residents have got to rely on moving out of town. The big one for me, which Stephen, the plan manager, has touched on here, is that the site was put in the Durham plan, and that was only adopted in 2020. Everybody, including the applicant, had the opportunity to object against this employment site, and I'm certain at the time that was they fully agreed to take it forward with the residential allowance which was given, along with the employment. So now to come sort of back 3 years' time and not wanting the employment site, it does question sort of where we are like with this application. And I think a big thing for me in relation to the, you know, the 106s, which has been waived previously on the previous residential applications, that is sort of, that's a public purse, that 106 money, which which the authority waive it to allow to enable these the previous applications. So for me, you know, to go against officer's recommendation and allow the removal of the employment side would also, like, you know, be sort of, you've give away like that 106 opportunity money to come back into the community. So for me, I'll definitely be supporting the officer's recommendation for refusal of this site. And, you know, there is, at the end of the day, there is ways and means that if it wasn't marketed like sort of for employment, to bring it back to a review through the Durham plan, to, you know, to show evidence that there is no need for the employment sites in such a allocation as Spennymoor. But as the plan manager's just rightly said there, everywhere else is absolutely booming with employment and there's a need for it. So I'll definitely be supporting the application for refusal here. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Alan. Maura, you're still here. It's you next.
Indeed, still here. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't think that we can pass an application that has such issues with drainage and where the noise issues haven't been addressed. We've got current residents there, but these are going to be future residents of Durham Gate if these houses are built. And, you know, we just can't build houses where it's not properly drained. The second, I think there's a secondary issue though, and that's the long-term one, and that's, is this site something that can be used for housing, or is this something that cannot be used for housing? And I'm completely stuck down the middle on this myself, because on the one hand, we've struggled for years to get people onto that specific site, and if we've got a site that's just lying there, it may as well be used for bungalows. But on the other hand, part of the reason why we haven't been able to get some people on that site is because we've got a local economy that's been in recession, I'm pretty sure. I don't think that we have data on regional economies anymore and whether or not they are in recession. But if that were to change, then potentially there would be a use for that site. And in just next to my ward, we have Thrislington Quarry, which has a massive amount of limestone, and it has a massive amount of high quality limestone that we're not allowed to touch because that's been put aside as high grade industrial quality limestone, and it's a strategic allocation of limestone for industry that we don't touch now since Redcar Steelworks went bust. But it doesn't mean that one day there's not going to be another industry in the region that could use limestone of that quality, so we don't quarry it for houses. And if we give away, my worry is we've master planned sites across the county, and I don't want to set precedents of giving away parcels of land that were master planned for other uses, particularly when we're talking about employment sites with the environmental issues that come with it versus sites for housing. So I don't think I can't support today's application because of the drainage issue alone. But I also have questions about whether we can put houses on there long term. I get what my colleagues have said, but if we start giving away all of the strategic business and employment land that we have, and we start chipping away at master plans, people might lose faith in our ability to master plan if they haven't already, and they might also we might also have backlash from businesses who might not trust us as a place to invest anymore if we're just going to take land that's allocated for them and give it to other uses. So I'm not going to be supporting today's application, and I'm quite split on whether I would support an application on this site in the future unless it is for employment.
Thank you, Maura. Jim Atkinson, you wanted to come back?
Yes, Chair, I just wanted to mention something Stephen said there. I didn't say that Durham recommended it for housing. I just said they didn't recommend it for an industrial use. That's what I said, Chair. And as far as the comments about, you know, keeping your windows open at night, I'm glad you've got enough money to pay for, enough blankets to keep you warm, like, you know, the price of fuel and things these days, and what the police might have to say about it. I don't know where that came from. What I was suggesting was, it's doing nothing's done nothing, and now it can do something. There's an opportunity. You're on about jobs. Those houses would fill up with people who have jobs, and they're going to bring all the money and all the intellectual property that goes with that. So from my perspective, that's why it's a good idea. And as far as an applicant putting forward an application for a building site that he couldn't drain properly, I think the risk's all theirs. You know, they'd have to be mad. Thank you.
Stephen wants to reply to that, Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to apologise, Councillor Atkinson, if I did pick up your comments earlier incorrectly. Apologies for that. All right.
Okay, it's over to you, Jonathan, next. Jonathan Elmer, please.
To Councillor Elmer from Brandon Division. To me, I think a very important aspect of this this application is the importance to cohere with plan-led decision-making. But it's the strategic planning and the consideration of allocations in different areas across the county. So Spennymoor, like most communities and towns, has major allocations have been made for residential development, major allocations have been made for business development, office use, and that's been determined on the basis of the balance of needs in that particular location to create a balanced community. And so to conduct a sort of major residential development on an area of land that isn't allocated for that really throws out of balance all of the other land allocations and uses that the County Durham planning process has made for the area. Obviously, we're using up a site that's allocated for business. There aren't any others, so that creates a restriction on the future potential for business development in the area. And what we want is a community where there is sufficient housing, but we know there at least is allocation and land made available to enable that to happen. And so that people who live in that area don't have to travel long distances to go to work, because there's a likelihood that they'll be able to get a job in their local area. At the moment, if you're just sort of going along the trajectory that some members would want in relation to putting residential development on this site, you're essentially creating a sort of sleeper town, dormitory town, where all the people have to travel some distance to get to access employment somewhere else. And of course, there's no rail link, the bus services are not particularly reliable, so you're creating quite a car-dependent community because of that as well. So I just want to, focus on that need for a plan-led process to create a balanced community. Other impacts associated with overloading the number of people that live there relate to the impact on local services, so schools, doctors, GPs, dentists, all of that sort of thing would then need to accommodate, and they've not been prepared for that sort of residential expansion. And of course, the density of this proposed development is what leads to all of these concerns we have in relation to the impact on future residents of noise, the likelihood of pollution, because there just isn't space to put any pollution reduction schemes in, like SUDS. You're essentially trying to squeeze too many houses in, and this causes the need to make compromises on all of these important policy areas. To me, I'm afraid that this application is driven very much by pound signs for bulk developers and not provision against local needs. So I will be supporting the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you, Jonathan. Patricia, over to you next.
Sorry, Chair, again. A lot has been made about the land being empty for a long time. Well, I came to Durham 15 years ago, and when I mentioned I was going to go and live in Durham, everyone went, Durham, where's that? Durham really wasn't on the map in that respect. Since I've lived here, the amount of development that has gone in and is going in at this moment is obviously people now are realising Durham is a serious place to come. So for me, along with housing has to come jobs. It has to make an area viable. And to take away, if we are in recession, this is your point, Moira, if we are going to come out of that at some point. We are going to need employment land. And we cannot just take a short-term view, as our governments do very often, a short-term view for our residents and the viability of the county. So to be quite frank with you, I just don't see as a committee that we've got any choice but to go with the officer's recommendation. We need industrial land so that we can provide jobs for all these people that are coming and that will be coming in all the other housing. There's housing going on all over, even locally. In all the little towns, we are all having housing, lots of housing being built. And the closer the job economy, the better, in my view. And I would not like to see that site go for more housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Does any other member want to contribute today? Alan, you want to come back?
Yeah, just one last final comment, George, and it's in relation to the Durham plan. And as Stephen said, you know, the employment sites in the plan are a fundamental part of the plan. And if we as a committee don't recognise that, we might as well rip that plan up and start again. It is a fundamental part, and we must recognise that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well, I think that's the end of the contributions. We've had a mover and a seconder to go with the officer's recommendation. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, that goes with the officer's recommendation. So thank you very much for your attendance today.